Sun Ra was a musician and band leader, and he was involved in music that could probably be best described as being experimental music. Sometimes he's kind of lumped amongst free jazz. He was active between 1934 and 1993 when he died, and he released over 100 albums in that time. Um, his kind of pivotal moment in his life, he describes as being in around 1936 or 1937. He took a trip to Saturn, and I couldn't possibly comment on whether there were any substances involved. Apparently, this was a religious experience. He gained in the process a philosophy and a mission to pacify the world through experimental music. And to all intents and purposes, it seems like he was completely convinced by this conviction. Either that, or it was a very elaborate joke that he perpetuated over a long period of time. He assembled a band, which was often called the orchestra, but changed names at various points. And apparently, members of the band were also convinced by his philosophy. Um, so, I think a polite word to describe him would be eccentric. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is an album by Sun Ra and his Solar Orchestra. I don't know what number album it is in the list of how many is produced. And yeah, we're back to Sun Ra again. So this is the fourth, I think, Sun Ra album that I've had the pleasure of reviewing on this channel. So I would describe this as being mid-sized band instrumental free jazz. So let's dig into some of this. The bands, there's quite a bit of brass, there's some percussion, there's woodwind, there's quite a lot of instrumentalists listed in the credits. Not all the instruments are credited. I don't know how many are not, but I could clearly hear cello, and I couldn't see any credit for any strings in there at all. Um, and free jazz. So I think free jazz, as any jazz does, varies quite a bit. I would say that this is about as free as I've come across so far, in that there are bits of structure in here, but generally it's pretty much out there. I'll dig into that a little bit in a minute or two. But I want to talk about a theory that I've got, and I do this occasionally. I have theories and thoughts that I want to throw in. And this one is about aesthetics. So our brains, and I know that this is not just something that I'm proposing. I know that there's research that shows that this is true. So our brains respond well to patterns, and we like symmetry. We like repetition. We like things that we can classify and categorize. We like knowing what expectations are for things. And in fact, cognition theory says that what we do all the time is that we form these ideas and models and structures in our heads to explain the world. And so our brains are really, really strong at this finding pattern stuff, where we're amazingly good at it to the extent that we find patterns where there aren't any. For example, when you look at clouds and you see a face or a dog or a dragon or something like that, that's your brain doing that and giving you kind of patterns or recognition of stuff where it doesn't actually exist or intentionally exist. So our brains like this, which is one of the reasons why in music, one of the things that we like is things that are rhythmic, things that are repeating, things that have structures and harmonic structures and time signatures that we can resonate with and that we understand. But there's a flip side to this coin, which is that we also like surprises and subversion. Now, I know less about why the brain likes this or why we enjoy it. Possibly this comes from a different part of the brain, but we find it stimulating. It's the kind of foundation of a lot of jokes and humour is to take an expectation and then subvert it, give you a surprise. Um, and a lot of art does both of these things. It has structure and then it has surprise and subversion of that structure. A lot of modern art in various different genres, to my mind, tends away from the structure and towards the chaotic. So what it's doing is it's emphasizing that surprise and subversion side of things away from the structure. So back to this album, it is very much on this kind of subversion end of the spectrum. It's very chaotic. There's very little in the way of discernible structure. That doesn't mean there isn't any, and there are bits that I could find in here. So there are lines here that an instrument plays that are not tuneful. It's not rhythmic in a conventional sense. The drums tend to have rhythms going at various points, but I think that's just the nature of drums. It's really hard to play drums in a completely unrhythmic fashion, given that it's percussive. And so it kind of goes away from time signatures, from harmonic structures, from any kind of melodic structures, and um, it kind of basically goes along the lines of everybody's just kind of ignoring everybody else and doing what they feel like. But it's still not quite. I'm going to come back to that a bit. So it's not harmonic, it's discordant. We've got detuned bits, we've got not in sync. There's playing of instruments to make impure tones. So normally when you're playing a saxophone, you try and play it so that you don't get a squeak. Well, here you're getting the squeaks. You're getting buzzes and scratches and things like that, sort of deliberately being produced. Um, and the overall effect could equally well, I think, be thought of as contemporary classical of various kinds. But free jazz does kind of swing towards the contemporary classical in some ways. The drum style somewhat signals jazz, just about, and it's one of the things where the labeling of jazz seems to come in is if the drums are played in a certain way. Often that basically means using a ride cymbal or using swing uh, feel to it. Um, yeah, as I keep saying, there are bits of structure. So there are bits where people are playing off each other. Obviously, got a conversation going between them. There's give and take. There's bits on the piano where there's actually chords that you can kind of go, yeah, that actually sounds like a chord. And there's collaboration between the members in speed and volume. So it tends to be of the same kind of level of, aesthetic chaoticness or more open and more quiet. So the louder, faster, more frantic bits are too much for me. So I'm now getting into my opinion of this stuff. Not a great fan of that stuff. It's too much stimulus. There's not enough pattern in it. And interestingly, I tend to do these reviews in batches. I'm going to be doing a review is going to come on the channel in a few days, but I'll do in this batch of Three of a Perfect Pair by King Crimson, which is a prog rock album, but that includes some improvisation that has quite a lot in common with free jazz. But I like that, and I don't like this. And I'm not really sure why. However, having said that, the quieter bits of this album are bits that I find more acceptable, kind of atmospheric, and I think that somewhat is down to the aesthetic and the actual textures that are used, but also I think that's down to it being less kind of overstimulating. It's more of a you can kind of take it in easier. So overall, as an album, well, it's definitely free jazz. It's definitely a thing. I think I even kind of get it, but as you probably picked up, I didn't like it. It's not for me a pleasant listening experience. I'm kind of curious as to whether I mean there must be people who enjoy listening to this for pleasure. I would definitely think it's something for stroking my beard to and going rather than something going yeah to. But some people might go, yeah. I mean, that indicates kind of this is thoughtful and this is enjoyment. Okay, it's definitely a thing for a minority audience, and I'm very keen on trying to avoid any kind of elitism in music. We're saying that something's more difficult to listen to, therefore it must be better. and therefore, if you enjoy it, you must be a better listener. I don't believe in those kind of value judgments based on how challenging something is to listen to. But it is definitely something to enter into the challenging listening competition. If you want to kind of have a competition with people, what's the most challenging stuff you've ever listened to? This could be in there. Um, it also made me wonder if this is the sort of thing that highbrow kids listen to rebel against their parents, rather than maybe more down to earth kids are listening to death metal or something like that. So that's what I think of this album. As always, I'd love to know what you think, especially if you love it. I'd love to know why or what it is that you enjoy about it. It might be exactly the things that I dislike. I'm tending to find this that when I dislike something, the thing that people like about it is often the thing that I actually, exactly the same thing that I dislike. But that's it from me for now.